They laughed when I walked into that courtroom, not strangers, my own daughter and her husband, Patricia, sitting there in her designer heels, whispering behind her manicured hand, while Michael grinned like he'd already won. They saw an old woman with trembling hands and an outdated purse. But they didn't see what was behind the calm smile. That if you're watching this, tell me, have you ever been underestimated so completely that it almost felt insulting to correct them? Because that's where my story begins. 6 months ago, my husband Robert died, and with him went 35 years of quiet partnership, love, and shared secrets, and, apparently, everyone's illusion of who I was. Robert left me everything: his businesses, his estate, his fortune, over $60 million in total. Our daughter expected the inheritance. She'd already picked out which house would be hers, which car she'd drive, how she'd invest the rest, but when the lawyer read Robert's will, it was all mine, not a cent to Patricia. She called it a mistake. Then she called it manipulation, and finally, she called it war. Within weeks, I was served legal papers, my own daughter suing me, claiming I was mentally incompetent, that I'd been manipulated, that I'd forged my husband's signature, that I wasn't capable of managing my affairs. Imagine reading that over your morning coffee, your child calling you a fraud in black and white legal print. They thought they were clever. They thought they could take everything by painting me as fragile, but what they didn't know was that I wasn't always just mom. Patricia never asked about my life before she was born, never questioned why there were law books in my study. Or why judges sent me Christmas cards every year. She didn't know that before I was Dorothy Hamilton, the wife, the mother, the homemaker, I was Dorothy Mitchell, Harvard Law graduate, defense attorney, and one of the youngest women ever to win a federal case before the age of 30. But I let her believe what she wanted to, because sometimes, being underestimated is the best armor you can wear. When the first hearing came, I walked into court wearing my old navy dress and low heels. No lawyer, no assistant, just me, the fragile old woman they expected to break. Patricia smirked when she saw me. Michael whispered something to their attorney, James Morrison, the man they'd hired to destroy me. Then the judge entered, and for a second, she froze. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition flicker. Her nameplate read, Honorable Judge Margaret Walsh, and just like that, memories came flooding back. Late nights at Harvard Law, cases we argued side by side. She'd known me as Dorothy Mitchell, the woman once nicknamed the Destroyer in the courtroom. Patricia had no idea who she was up against. Morrison began confidently, painting his picture of me, a confused widow who'd lost touch with reality, a woman too fragile to manage millions, a mother who'd somehow tricked her dying husband. He spoke about me like I wasn't even in the room. When he finished, the judge turned to me, Mrs. Hamilton, are you representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor, I said softly. I couldn't afford an attorney. Patricia laughed. That was her mistake. Do you understand the nature of these proceedings? The judge asked. I believe so, I said. My daughter thinks I'm not smart enough to manage my own money. Morrison objected immediately, but the judge let me continue. Mr. Morrison, I said, looking straight at him, you claim I forged my husband's will. Are you suggesting the witnesses and the notary were also manipulated by me? He hesitated. The courtroom went still, and that's when I saw the first crack in Patricia's confidence. They had built their entire case on an illusion, the idea that I was weak, forgetful, broken, but they didn't understand that every so-called mistake I'd made was deliberate. The lost receipts, the questions about online banking, the phone calls asking for help, every one of them was a breadcrumb I left behind. Because sometimes you have to let people think you're weak to see how far they'll go. To betray you, Robert had warned me. He'd known exactly what kind of greed our daughter was capable of. He'd even left me a letter with one simple line, when they come for you, call Margaret Walsh. Now I knew why. Morrison stumbled through his next statement. Judge Walsh leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, she said, I've reviewed the documentation. The will was verified, witnessed, and notarized. Do you have any concrete evidence of fraud? He faltered. We believe the evidence will appear during the competency evaluation, Your Honor. Judge Walsh turned her gaze toward me, and for a split second, her eyes softened. Mrs. Hamilton, she said, you may proceed. I stepped closer, my voice calm but steady. Your Honor, my late husband trusted me with everything because I built that empire with him. Every contract, every merger, every decision. He didn't leave me his fortune out of pity. He left it because I earned it. Patricia's jaw tightened that I could almost hear her heart pounding across the room. That I ended my statement with a single line that silenced the court: my daughter believes she's fighting a helpless old woman. She doesn't realize she's facing the attorney who taught her father everything he knew about business law. Even Judge Walsh raised her brows at that. The gavel struck once, the hearing was adjourned. As Patricia left, she wouldn't meet my eyes, but I didn't need her to, because the war she thought she'd win in one day was only just beginning. That night, I sat in Robert's study, the one place in the house that still smelled like him. That I pulled out my old case files, my notes, my research, and I felt something I hadn't in decades. Purpose. That they'd forgotten who I was, but tomorrow, they'd remember. Patricia thought she was hunting a rabbit, but she was about to realize she'd cornered a wolf. Never underestimate the quiet ones that were usually the ones writing the ending. Would you forgive your child if they did this to you? Tell me in the comments. I want to know how you would end this story.